This video is for employers who actually care about the psychological well-being of their employees, so like no one, and I fully expect it to get 0 views. Not me drawing inspiration from Netflix again, but last year I watched the movie The Widow Clicquot, a biopic about the founder of one of the largest champagne houses in the world, and part of it got me thinking, which I'll come back to toward the end of this video. Workplace bullying is not black and white. I have over 100 videos about workplace bullying for a reason, and I have a relatively low subscriber count for a reason. People who like easy answers and simple solutions probably don't watch my channel. They can go somewhere else. Workplace bullying is a group dynamic. Bullies come in all shapes and sizes, and so do targets. Workplace bullies bully for a variety of different reasons. See one of my recent videos, The Whys of Workplace Bullying Revisited. And targets get bullied for a variety of different reasons. See my video, Why Are You Bullied in the Workplace? It's complicated. So the problem is probably going to require an equally complicated approach, but hopefully there will be enough information in this video to get us started. I've already spoken at length about what targets of workplace bullying can do on their part to deal with workplace bullying. See my video, The Do's and Don'ts of Workplace Bullying Revisited. So this video is for things that employers can do on their end if they want to do anything about the problem. But that's a big if. Again, the idea that any employer in the world actually gives a crap about the psychological or emotional well-being of their employees is laughable. Statistically, there are data to demonstrate that a significant percentage of leaders, at least in corporate environments, have cluster B personality disorders, could be as high as 20%. They don't care about you. They don't care about anyone but themselves. They are familiar enough with basic social mores to know that publicly exhibiting antisocial characteristics is a bad look, so they all pay lip service to empathy with the "we just want you to be happy" crap, which they use to gaslight their victims as having an attitude problem. But we all know the truth about these people. The only reason they adhere to physical safety regulations is that the government makes them. They just don't want to get fined or sued. They don't care about people. They do, however, care obsessively about one thing, and that's money. The financial costs of workplace bullying are well documented. So the first step for organizations is for workplace bullying advocates to demonstrate to them just how much bullying is costing their organizations, which is in the millions of dollars every year. And it's not just the turnover, the revolving door, all the firing, forced resignations, rehiring, retraining. It's also the sick leave, absenteeism, presenteeism, which actually undercuts productivity, etc. And it's also the astronomical amount of time, money, and resources that workplace bullies waste on bullying, not just carrying it out, but also plotting and planning. The gossip alone, which is a calculated strategy to destroy the target's reputation, is just the tip of the iceberg, and almost all of it is done using company time, money, and resources like equipment. If you work in an office environment, I can pretty much guarantee you that your bullies have an email chain going around about you, and a lot of bullies take the smearing onto social media. When I was in 5th grade, my friend Ashley formed an I Hate Claire club on the playground. If you are a target of workplace bullying, your bullies probably have an I Hate Claire club on social media, which they access both outside and inside the workplace. A lot of workplace bullies spend more time bullying than they do actually working, and they go to work for that express purpose. Bullying is the reason they work, and I have a video on that too. Also, as I've been saying for years, workplace bullies are inherently amoral people. If they're not above bullying, then what else are they up to? Workplace bullying may not be illegal yet, but if they can get away with it, which they always do, workplace bullies may up the ante and commit real crimes that can do a lot of damage to the organization. So employers need to be informed of that too. If business leaders don't care about workplace bullying, do they at least care about the bottom line and their organization's survival? So that's the first thing. The second thing is to revise the mandatory discrimination and harassment training that most employers force employees to sit through, that waste everyone's time and insults everyone's intelligence. You know, the one where they basically tell you not to use the N-word and not to send your coworkers dick pics. That's kind of like putting a warning label on a bottle of shampoo telling you not to drink it. The only reason they do that is HR's version of CYA. Well, we told you. Again, they don't care about creating a psychologically safe environment. They just don't want to get sued. I've gotten some pushback on this, but I still think there needs to be a clear definition of what exactly workplace bullying is, which I've detailed at length on this channel and in my essay on workplace bullying. See my video, A Working Definition of Workplace Bullying. I'm not an attorney, but I believe that I have read that you want to avoid over-specifying because that can be too restrictive and give bullies wiggle room. However, I would still go ahead and list out the 20 or so workplace bullying techniques that I have identified with expanded definitions and specific examples, and with the disclaimer that this is not an exhaustive list. For example, the workplace bullying technique that I call snubbing is not just the silent treatment, it's also all of the ostracism, exclusion, and isolation, both professionally and personally. So employees need to be informed of what behaviors will not be tolerated in the workplace and what kind of repercussions there will be if they are found in violation of anti-bullying policy, which brings me to my next step. An ombudsman. Pretty much my only useful takeaway from 2 years of J school. There really needs to be an ombudsman, either individual or group, dedicated solely to investigating claims about workplace bullying, and it can't be HR. Y'all already know how I feel about HR. I'm not interested in overhauling HR into a department that would actually serve the interests of employees, because HR had decades to do that and they blew it. They have very clearly demonstrated that they would rather suck up to power than protect human rights. They've been given too many second chances. They don't deserve any more. What is the definition of insanity? At this point, we would all be fools to trust HR to do anything to help us. We all make choices, HR has made theirs. So as far as I'm concerned, HR can eat his shit sandwich and choke on it. Fuck those people. An ombudsman can be just one person. If an organization is large enough, it can be a group of people. However many there are, they need to be located off-site. They need to be educated in narcissistic abuse, preferably psychologists or at the very least social workers, and they need to be paid by the employees, not the organization. Yes, all employees can pay into a fund that is the sole source of the ombudsman's salaries, just like elected representatives in a democracy. That is the only way to ensure that the ombudsman will work in the interest of the employees, not the organization. And I say off-site to mitigate exposure to all the love bombing and the manipulation that the bullies do to the higher-ups all the time. And no, I don't think contracting with a third party like a counseling practice would work, because that service provider would still be paid by the organization, which means it could still be manipulated by power. And I say investigate, not mediate. Again, you do not mediate between an aggressor and a victim. Workplace bullying cannot be mediated. For example, in the domestic violence field, there is some overlap between domestic violence and workplace bullying, and I believe there is a book about that. When police are called out on a domestic violence call, the first thing the officers do is separate the two parties to interview them individually, because The aggressor will most likely do what your bullies do, which is love, charm, and manipulate the authority figures while smearing and gaslighting their victim. If ombudsmen are educated in how this stuff really works and independent from the organization, they will not sit the bullies down together with the target to talk things out. They will simply look into claims, conduct an investigation, make an assessment, and recommend the appropriate punishment if a violation has been made. And now for my final recommendation. But first, I want to preface this by saying that I rewatched my videos from the past 2 to 3 years, and I want to apologize for my excessive narcissism fixation. That was just cringe. I sound like I'm being paid every time I mention the word narcissist. I assure you, I'm not. And though I really am trying to avoid it, and with the awareness of just how narcissistic I sound myself, I really have not found a better paradigm for what targets of workplace bullying experience. Everything, I mean literally everything about narcissistic abuse. The lack of empathy, the piss poor boundaries, the pathological lying, the pathological jealousy, the vindictiveness, the narcissistic rage, the smearing, the gaslighting, the entitlement, the attention, approval, and validation seeking, even the word salad, gangs all here. The entire narcissism lexicon perfectly encapsulates workplace bullying. And it is my hope that if the topic interests you, you can then go check out other narcissism content that might help you. Like, for example, Dr. Ramani's DEEP technique or the gray rock method. I think those are useful. One thing I do like about comparing workplace bullying to narcissistic abuse is this notion of supply, which I think is interesting because supply is also an economic term. Let me explain. As I've also stated, workplace bullies are not there to work. They are there to do everything but work. Specifically, they go to work to source unmet emotional and sometimes sexual needs. Workplace bullies go to work to bully. They think that bullying is the work. They spend more time bullying than they do actually working because they think that all the bullying they do is more important than the actual work, all while accusing their targets of not working because, of course, you gotta love the hypocrisy. I know it's shocking, but I'm going to talk about astrology. Oh God, here she goes again, but hear me out. In case you didn't know, the planet Mars is the planet of anger, conflict, and war. But because there is light and shadow in everything, it's also your drive. It's your sex drive. Mars is the phallus, it's the PP. The glyph for Mars looks like an erect penis. Everyone has testosterone. Everyone has a dick. But it's also your work ethic. It's the way you work and it's why you work. Your Venus is your heart. Your Venus tells me your ideal partner, your love language, what you find beautiful and what you like to beautify. But your Mars tells me why you do stuff. It's Stanislavski's method. What's my motivation? If you didn't have Mars in your chart, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And if you're familiar with the essential dignities, you know that Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Mars in Scorpio, not bad. Mars is domicile in Scorpio, but these people are obsessed with power. Mars in Scorpio, I want power. Taylor Swift. Mars in Leo, I want attention. Everybody, look at me. I need attention. I need attention. I need attention. Donald Trump. Mars in Aquarius, I want freedom. I can do anything I want and no one can tell me what to do. I can stick my little ding-a-ling in any hole, anytime, anywhere, and I don't have to wear my party hat because no one tells me what to do. Elon. Mars in Taurus, I want money. Fair enough. Nothing wrong with that. Mars in Pisces, I have no boundaries. The fish has no exoskeleton, ruled by Jupiter, the planet of no boundaries. Mars in Pisces is a penis with no boundaries, Andrew Tate and Epstein. I have Mars in Capricorn. Why is Mars exalted in Capricorn? No offense to my Capricorns, but Capricorn is a pretty basic sign. It's just work. That's pretty much it. Capricorns work. Capricorn is Rihanna singing work, 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 work. I think that's so funny because Riri's a Pisces, and Pisces is always accused of laziness. Mars is exalted in Capricorn because there is nothing work adjacent. There is no ancillary reward, extrinsic or intrinsic. Mars in Capricorn, I just work. I work, therefore I am. I work because I work. There is no other reason. I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm here to work. I'm not here for supply. Again, workplace bullies are not there to work. They're in it for supply. They have Mars in supply. And supply, again, is an economic term. So when you're dealing with a societal ill, do you tackle the supply or the demand? War on drugs, human trafficking, a lot is done to cut off supply and to punish suppliers. But very little is done to address the root cause of the demand, which is the void within that people are trying to fill with substances and sex. This culture is supply-centric, and I think that's because it's easier. Punishment is easier to pull off than real healing, which ultimately needs to happen on a spiritual level. Why do workplace bullies bully? They're sick. All abuse comes out of a place of deep trauma and a colossal amount of pain. And in a perfect world, we would wish everyone healing. We would want everyone to heal. It's better for everybody, but we don't have that kind of time. We don't have time to wait for our bullies to go meditate on world peace in an ashram in India for 10 years. We have to pay rent. We have to keep the trains running on time. There's the utopian ideal, and then there's just the reality. I'll give you an example. Because I've lived almost my entire life in a subtropical climate, I live about 2 hours from the Gulf of Mexico, because that's what it's called. It's called the Gulf of Mexico, you dumb shit motherfuckers! Love and light. Did Donald Trump fail high school Spanish? Because his hatred of the Mexican people at this point is beyond pathological, it's psychotic. It's giving Hitler hated his art teacher. Like, that's the vibe it's giving. Anyway, we don't really have seasons here. We have heat and humidity. That's pretty much it. And insects in my part of the world are kind of like 13-year-old white girls at a Taylor Swift concert. There's a lot of them. And because I worked with expats for over 15 years, I know that they are not used to that, and they are often quite shocked to learn that they cannot maintain their lifestyle here, especially Europeans who have benefited from pretty much the best climate in the world for the past couple thousand years. It's like, let me get this straight. You're going to make an omelet in the morning, leave the runny eggshells and the bits of tomato in the trash can and the greasy pan in the sink while you are at work all day. And then you're surprised that your place is overrun by cockroaches when you get home. I had a student from France who left the loaf of bread, the butter, and la confiture on the countertop with the windows open while she drove the kids to school in the morning. Girl, no. I swear I should make a video about pest mitigation, how to live bug-free in a subtropical climate. Suffice it to say, I have an alternative definition of cleanliness. I lived for about a quarter of a century alone in one-bedroom apartments, and I almost never had a bug problem. I once lived for 2 years in a first-floor apartment just meters from the edge of the bayou. If you don't know what a bayou is, it's just this disgusting malaria, mosquito infested muck and mire, just beyond revolting. And I only had one roach that came in one time when I left a bag of chocolate candy open for a minute, which I was using for spell work, so I consider that a good sign. And I think cockroaches are an apt metaphor for workplace bullies. Other than that, I almost never had a bug problem. How did I do it? I cut off supply. First of all, everything goes inside the refrigerator. Everything. I never put anything inside cabinets or drawers. Cabinets and drawers were always empty. Everything comestible or even potable went inside the refrigerator at all times. I'm talking flour, salt, of course, sugar, all oils, olive oil, peanut butter, coffee, tea, even bottled water. Everything. Everything goes inside the refrigerator. Everything you normally leave out, you can't. I never left anything out at any time. And all of my dishes I put inside the dishwasher. I didn't use the dishwasher for washing dishes. I used it for storage. If it was late and I was too tired or drunk to do the dishes, I put them inside the refrigerator overnight and I did them the next day. Yes, I put dirty dishes inside the fridge. I never left anything in the sink. And to top it all off, I put my trash inside the refrigerator too. I took any trash I had with me every time I left my apartment, even if I went out multiple times during the same day, but I didn't want to go outside at night. So any trash I had left, I put inside the refrigerator to dispose of outside the next day. Yes, I really am that weird. And I sealed my door with a special door bottom that I installed in almost every apartment that I lived in. Turn off all your lights so your home is completely dark. And if you can see any light coming under your door, that means you have a gap, which means you also have a draft. So sealing it is good for your electric bill too. I never had kids or animals, so I also sprayed on a weekly basis. And I always lived near nature in a very hot, very humid climate, and I almost never had any problems. In my last apartment, the only time roaches came in was when the apartments around me were vacant, so there was nowhere else for them to go, and they would quickly die because there was nothing inside mine for them. In other words, there was no supply. To borrow from Queen Mimi, "Ain't gonna feed you, I'ma let you starve." Which brings me back to Widow Clicquot. A real person, Barbe Ponsadin, lived in the 1800s. Around the turn of the 19th century, she married into the Clicquot family, who owned vineyards in Champagne. Her husband ran the company but died some years later. So she took over, which she had a right to do because under Napoleonic law, widows were the only women who were allowed to own their own businesses. And she transformed it into Veuve Clicquot. Veuve in French means widow. If you imbibe, you'll get no judgment from me. We all need a little extra medicine sometimes, but I'm sure you're familiar with the yellow label. And to this day, it remains one of the largest champagne houses in the world. Now the movie, which is actually an English movie, is told from a postmodern feminist perspective, so the authenticity is highly specious. This is the early 1800s we are talking about here. But there's one scene where Barbe is talking about how she wants to structure the business. And she mentions something she calls la roue, the wheel, meaning that every employee, from the children who crushed the grapes because children worked at that time, to the salesmen who circumvented the blockade to get to Russia, would participate equally in the organization. In other words, every employee would have equal status, equal weight, and an equal voice. In other words, a round table. In other words, equality. The opposite of hierarchy. Part of the supply for workplace bullies is the hierarchy. Now, not all workplace bullying is punching down, and I think it is unfortunate that it is commonly framed as such. A lot of workplace bullying is punching across, and I have a video on that. It's not just the narcissistic bosses, it's the underlings. All abusers want power because they are fundamentally disempowered people because they have no idea what real power is or how to empower themselves from within. And because of their low rank in the hierarchy, often the subordinates don't have any power because they don't have any supervisory capacity. So they derive power by bullying their lateral colleagues. Bunch of babies squabbling like brats on the floor. But hierarchy is definitely one of the tools that workplace bullies abuse in order to do what they do. In fact, they are as addicted to the hierarchy as they are to bullying. Notice how obsessed workplace bullies are with their silly little job titles that don't actually mean anything, like Senior Consulting Manager of Operational Oversight. What does that even mean? When I worked in corporate communications, I was bullied by a team of so-called writers who called themselves senior writer. Meanwhile, there never was any junior. That doesn't make very much sense, I don't think. That's like having one bullet point without a second one. You can't have a list of one. It's like people who are so precious about their email signatures that they put their degrees in them. Hierarchy is something that workplace bullies abuse in order to differentiate, to assert dominance, and to otherize, to create the sub that their egos need. Hierarchy reinforces their egos and their superiority complex. It is a source of supply. This meeting is only for the directors, not just the managers. It's like people who fly business class. They don't need the extra leg room. They just want to differentiate, to feel special, and business class cannot exist without coach. I feel like people who actually care about that kind of crap didn't get enough stickers in school. I feel like workplace bullies did not go to prom. I don't know, that's just the vibe I'm getting. So one solution for workplace bullying may be to eliminate the supply that workplace bullies are there for. And one way to do that may be by eliminating the hierarchy. Now, I want to mention here that there is something called a flat management style, which does away with middle management, but that still leaves an executive class. I don't have an MBA. You guys let me know what you think about that. I can already hear some of you asking, but Claire, does real equality even exist? Don't people naturally separate into leaders and followers? Hierarchy exists even in the animal world. This is true, but the key word here is natural. Organizational hierarchy, like every human construct, is unnatural because it is inherently narcissistic. The system, for lack of a better term, was created by narcissistic people to encourage, promote, and reward narcissistic traits. And look at the result. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. Real leaders and real hierarchy are ultimately spiritual constructs. As above, so below. Real leaders do not dominate or lord it over people. They don't boss other people around or tell other people what to do. And they certainly don't bully, degrade, disparage, devalue, criticize, judge, mock, make fun of, ridicule, insult, or ostracize. There is really only one thing that real leaders in this world do, and that is one word: inspire. Real leaders, natural leaders at the top of the spiritual hierarchy, can simply walk into a room without doing or saying anything, but by their energy and presence alone, inspire everyone in the environment to evolve into the best versions of themselves. Real leaders lead by example. They lead by inspiration, not domination. However, in order to inspire from the word spirit, you would have to actually have a soul. And we've all worked with a lot of people who clearly don't. And most of them are in positions of power. Real leaders in this world are kind of like black Republicans. They're a novelty item. They're limited edition. Someone once famously said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't think that's exactly it. I think the people who want power, false power, earthly power, are already corrupt. In any organization, the people who are the most aggressively jockeying for positions of power and climbing the ladder are almost always the most narcissistic. Don't get me wrong, they like the money. They won't say no to it. They'll hump that coin like a dog on a fire hydrant. But for them, it's not really about the money. It's about the power. They just want to tell other people what to do. And they need a sub. They need people beneath them, subordinate, in a one-down position, so they can feel powerful. As I've stated, there are two kinds of leaders in the workplace. Either they are cluster B, psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists themselves, or they're weak. One of the reasons workplace bullying exists at all is two words: weak leadership. The weak leaders in the workplace are not necessarily bad people per se. You know they're not. They're not personality disordered. They can be decent, but they are always, always weak. They do not have the emotional and or spiritual tools or wherewithal to deal with the problem, and they can be very easily manipulated and controlled. There is almost always someone somewhere above them who is telling them what to do. And they are in positions of leadership because of their weakness. They don't threaten anyone. I feel like people who are genuinely qualified for real leadership, people who are at the top of the spiritual food chain, are actually the least likely to want power. Because higher level souls get so beaten down by all of the abuse and the bullying at the hands of low level spirits, they have imposter syndrome. I'm not worthy. Real leaders usually don't particularly enjoy telling other people what to do, and they don't see why they should. They kind of expect other people to just be able to govern themselves. They're projecting. It's human to project. Everyone projects. It's like a law of physics. It's just that the true believers among us project their own goodness onto everyone around them. That is, until other people's nihilism beats their faith out of them too. The other issue with equality is a more ontological question around hierarchy. Is human hierarchy just a narcissistic construct, or is it a necessary evil? In The Widow Clicquot, when Barbe is talking about this wheel she wants for her organization, she is surrounded by a bunch of male managers, the detritus of her predecessor's team, who are all standing around mansplaining to her about how what she wants won't work, she can't do what she wants to do, and she has to do what they tell her to do if she wants her business to succeed. So I'll read you part of that dialogue, which I transcribed. A man named Droit says to her, "Without a strict adherence to hierarchy, there is chaos, anarchy." Barbe says, "A wheel, a circle, we are sitting together at the table, we will trade ideas, including everyone in the decision." To which Droit responds, "You make it sound like a dinner party." And here her longtime sales agent and lover in the film, Louis Bonne, says, "The wheel is a beautiful notion, but it's destined to fail. If you are not willing to dictate without hesitation, you may lose the respect of the men working under you. You make them uncomfortable." And Bob responds, "So the ability to listen to others, to collaborate, is not a sign of strength? So hierarchy comforts you, and I must give up my idea of the wheel because it makes men uncomfortable." And Bunn corrects her, "Because it doesn't project power." I told you that was a very modernized version of the story. I really don't think people actually talked like that in the early 1800s. But they do now. So my other Netflix inspo for this video is a reality dating show. Shocking. Again, I know. Look, I don't have relationship trauma, so reality dating shows and rom-coms are some of the only types of content that I can consume without being triggered. I just think it's so interesting to watch all of the dynamics. And Love is Blind France just dropped last night. Girl, I was waiting for that one. I'm busy. But I'm still here for y'all, because that's how hard I work for for you. Anyway, in Love is Blind Habibi, which features contestants from all over the Levant, one of the couples is Amar and Karma. I love that name. And on their first date, Karma tells Amar that her hobby is belly dancing. Actually, it's not a hobby. It is her life's greatest passion. It is her healing and it's her art. And he immediately responds to her, I don't like that. Just for future reference, if a prospective suitor shits all over your interest the minute that you meet that person, that is not the partner for you. For some reason, they get engaged anyway. How do you think that works out for them? Predictably, they break up over the dancing. Amar keeps saying that belly dancing is not acceptable in their culture, and none of the cast members disputes this. Apparently, belly dancing in the Middle East is kind of like exotic dancing. Who knew? You learn something new every day. And even though Karma is fully clothed with long sleeves and a floor-length skirt when she does it, he does not want her to do it and she won't give it up. So it's a non-negotiable. At the reunion, Amar has a lot of justifications for his position. He talks about his parents and how he is modeling their dynamic. Of course, he talks about their culture and their traditions. And when one of the hosts suggests that his attitude may be perceived as controlling, he says he doesn't think he's being controlling. He says he thinks that his stance is one of, quote, protection and leadership. And then he says, and I had to rewind it so that I could listen to this again, and this is a direct quote. If a man isn't a leader, a woman will see him as weak. Ah, the truth is finally revealed. Finally, he exposes what this is really all about. It's not about the dancing. It's about the respect. In a cishet relationship, the man needs to feel respected. The woman needs to feel cherished. And in my completely uneducated, uninformed opinion, most relationships implode because one or both parties are not holding up their end of the bargain. And this Amar fellow has decided that the only way that he can earn respect in a relationship is by giving orders, to lead by domination, not inspiration. In other words, he would probably agree with Louis Bunn. Without hierarchy, there is no respect. As I stated in one of my previous videos, some workplace bullies want you to be afraid of them. They are allergic to equality because in their minds, equality is tantamount to disrespect. If you do not fear them, that means you don't respect them. If you have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to approach them in a spirit of equality, they are outraged with this how dare you energy. How dare you presume to be my equivalent? So here's the question. Do we have hierarchy in this world because narcissists need it for supply? Or do we have hierarchy because codependents need someone to tell them what to do? Or is it both? As I stated in my trad wife video 2 years ago, the desire to be a follower, to be subordinate, is Peter Pan syndrome. Choosing to follow is emotional immaturity because it is voluntarily abdicating responsibility. The tradwives who say they believe that men should lead and women should submit are actually getting a get out of jail free pass out of accountability. If he's calling all the shots when the shit hits the fan, then she can just shift all the blame to him and wash her hands clean. Wasn't my decision. That's what he told me to do. Similarly, one could argue that even working for an employer is Peter Pan syndrome. Yes, there are some advantages. You might get a salary, maybe some benefits, maybe your employer helps pay your taxes. There's familiarity, predictability, routine, comfort. It's someplace to go every day, and if your coworkers aren't bullies, there is the opportunity for social interaction, but it's still technically a childlike state of dependency. One could argue that any dependency on anyone or anything outside of yourself is immaturity, because it is a reluctance to own the power, the sovereignty, and the agency that you already hold entirely inside of yourself. For example, there is a theory that even a belief in God, Sky Daddy, is Peter Pan syndrome because it externalizes your own internal divinity. We are all fashioned in the image of the Creator, which is not to say that you are God, but that God is within you. Everyone has all 12 signs and all 10 planets are in his or her chart. So the entire universe is inside of you. Not to wax too philosophical, I'm just throwing that out there as food for thought. What does that have to do with the workplace? Again, do codependents need hierarchy because they need false gods to tell them what to do because they are unwilling to simply grow up? As I stated in a previous video, in a perfect world, all adults would govern themselves, but they don't. The legal system exists for a reason. When you get behind the wheel, do you drive the speed limit because you are consciously thinking to yourself, I choose to obey traffic laws because I care about my own well-being and that of all the drivers around me? That's like saying that you watch Emily in Paris for the plot. No, you don't. Girl, stop lying. You just like all those cute little outfits and all them fine-ass looking man children. Who knew Frenchmen were that hot? Frenchmen didn't look like that when I lived in France. It's not fair. C'est pas juste. If you were to move to a remote location and found a new settlement, the first edifice that you would build would be a jail. After that, a hospital, and after that, a school. The first thing you would build would be a prison. Because why? Because people don't govern themselves, which is why you need a government. Government is not a necessary evil. It's just necessary. Again, there's the utopian ideal, and then there's just the reality. All of this to say that before we do away with hierarchy, there may be some adult children among us who need it. Some people, bullies, need to tell other people what to do, and some people, no matter how much they complain, secretly like to be told what to do. In a perfect world, hierarchy may not be necessary, but in this one, it may be a necessary evil. I hope that helps. Take care.